Sometimes when we talk, we don't know what the so we have to call and ask a friend. I wanna know the things you know. It'll make a better show. You're the one on whom we all depend.
Hey, Unfuckers. It's your boy, Max. I have a very special edition of Phone a Friend today. Didn't even tease it in the name of the show because it's that special. This is big. What's even different than most other Phone a Friends is I actually have the guest right here in the studio with me. Couple of challenges along the way. I don't have a third camera yet. Guest's already laughing. I don't have a third camera yet. So we're going to be pinging back and forth a little bit. So that's on me, okay? I wasn't ready. Didn't think I'd actually get to meet this person in person, even though I've known this person for more than 20 years. This is my brother. This is my dear friend. We're there for each other's children, but not all of his. It's the great Manny Faces. What's up, Manny?
Air horn noises.
Will you put those in afterwards?
Sure.
This is sort of meta, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Just okay?
These days, okay is great.
Okay, so you're in Nueva York.
Yeah,
You're here for us.
I am.
Tell me, first of all, what are you doing here? To what do we owe this unbelievable surprise that we had to do a Phone a Friend?
Well, I appreciate it. We should just have phones. We should be holding a phone.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for aesthetics. I'm here because, well, for a few reasons, but I produce another podcast called HipHop Can Save America.
What?
Yes, I don't know if you've heard of it. And apparently, the Signal Awards, the big podcast award organization, felt it was worthy of being selected as a finalist in the music category for their big yearly event.
So we put that out in the newsletter, so Unfuckers should be familiar with the fact that Manny just won not a Signal Award, another Signal Award.
Right. Yeah, 2. So last year, Newsbeat won the politics and news category. We were bronze, which was basically third, but certainly with all the ones being entered, that's fantastic. We were up there with like Al Jazeera and some NPR outlet, so quality stuff.
You should note, by the way, that you travel with your Newsbeat gear just so you're always repping.
Actually,
right?
I have a backpack and it just sticks up, it's hard on the train,
That's
but
pretty
it works.
great that you do that,
Yeah,
though.
I got to do it. Walking billboard is literal in my case. So then this year for Hip Hop Can Save America in the music category. And again, up against some NPR affiliated show and pretty high praise for the outfits that I work with and work on.
So what I thought was really cool about Signal Awards is that it's the Listener's Choice Awards, the only part of it that was actually voted on.
Right. Well, they do both. So you can. So we got a bronze award in the category. So on its merits, there are judges, and we actually won that. So we won an award. We were tied for third. It was weird. The winner was silver, but then the other two were tied for bronze. There was like no gold. It's weird.
I call bullshit. I smell a rat.
I just say we're tied for second. So, which is great. And then on top of that, each category they basically do a vote, a Listener's Choice Award. I know some of the Unfuckers voted. Some of the Hicksas voted. I don't have a cool saying for my listeners like you do. So, I got to figure that out. Kasa is the acronym. It doesn't work as well as Unfuckers.
It's going to be a long hour.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm here for that. They're doing a kind of a gathering of finalists and winners, and I want to show my face. Shouts to my eternal consulting producer, Summer. She's from up here, so figured, hey, let's go to this thing and dress to the nines and flaunt about our bronze prize in the music category.
Well, I love it, man. Yep. I'm so happy. I'm always happy to see you. It's been weird not having you in New York, even though you were in New Jersey for a little while. I don't count those years. I still call them New York years because, everybody knows how I feel about New Jersey. So I think we have a couple of areas of intersection between Hip Hop Can Save America and what we're doing on Fucking the Republic, and certainly what you've produced with Newsbeat, as we've been able to collaborate with them a few times. I have actually a lot of political oriented questions and topics that I want to get to with respect to Black culture is seen through the lens of hip hop. So I think that we can have kind of a spirited dialogue there. But let's just start with this concept first and foremost, that hip hop can save America. You had a great response to a listener that had written in about, I know you say hip hop can save America. I don't want to cast everything out about the entire platform, but rap music contains so much homophobia and misogyny. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. Your response to that, not only was it wonderful enough that the listener wrote in and thanked you for it.
Right.
It actually got to something that I conflate all the time, and I was wondering if you could start with the premise that hip hop as culture,
right,
rap music as a piece of that culture, and just sort of unpack some of the, I guess, not misunderstandings, but some of the misconceptions that are misconstrued between the two of them.
Yeah, that's at the core of it, right? The confusion is that for those not familiar with the culture, hip hop as the genre. It's the same name, right? That's the weird thing about it, because it has the same name. So they often get conflated. Hip hop, as I explained, in that response, hip hop is a culture. It's not because I want it to be one, right? This is something that's basically been defined by the dictionary. What culture is: a collection of social norms, a collection of traditions that are passed down. All the things that are culture, hip hop has these things. So if you look in the dictionary, if you go to academia, Cornell has a wonderful collection, an archive, the hip hop collection. If you look at their wording, and we archive artifacts from within the culture of hip hop. Yale University, all these academic, the Smithsonian calls it a culture. The U.S. Department of State has a program called Next Level where they send hip hop artists, teaching artists, basically an MC, a DJ, a dancer, a graffiti writer, a visual artist, out to different parts of the world as cultural ambassadors. Strictly hip hop, but culturally to different parts of the world. So for all these definitions, the city of Paris, France, has funded a giant hip hop culture center. It's called in France. I don't like culture, blah blah blah. I don't. But it's called the Hip Hop Culture Center. So all of these institutions, these legacy institutions, which on one hand, who cares what a legacy institution says about hip hop? We could talk about that. But on the other hand, okay, this is a culture. It's recognized as such. Most important, by the participants or the citizens of that culture. If enough people get together and say, we have a culture, we have a culture. So within that culture is everything culture would have. Traditions, language, stories, different kind of cultural attachments, fashion, style, and ways of doing things. These things get passed down just like any other culture. But we also have an entertainment aspect, just like any culture would. If you think about your ethnicity or where your background is, you all have traditional songs, traditional dance, traditional ways of poetry or speaking. Well, hip hop has that too. The fact that entertainment aspect of hip hop, and more specifically the rap element of it, has been so commodified and so front and center, that's all people think of when they think of hip hop and or rap, is the rap music that they know, either that was on the radio or that they knew in college or growing up or whatever.
So if anybody just even remotely familiar with rap culture has an idea of the origin stories in and around the boroughs of New York and a little bit out on the West Coast, but we all have some sort of idea of the origin stories of where it started with, let's say, Kool Herc and stealing electricity off of the pole to have, dances and had set DJs up. Really cool origin stories to the music part of it. Is there in the scholarship of hip hop today? Mm-hmm. Is there an understanding or a consensus that hip hop that rap was born within hip hop culture, or rap is the genesis of hip hop culture?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a good debate. chicken egg, in a way. What came first? What came, in fact, the Kool Herc story, the origin story, is widely, acknowledged, but nothing as large as a social movement, a genre of music, a culture could have a single point of origin. There can't be a big bang that hip hop was invented in Kool Herc's, in the basement of the apartment.
I'm going through the history of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and they all have like really specific ideas of when shit started.
They got a guy.
I'm getting kind of fucked up here.
They got a guy, and he was it. True, I guess, but I mean, yes, true, but Jesus' whole thing, and I'm not the best expert, there was a bunch of stuff that happened in...
No, let's not. I'm begging you.
No, I'm saying...
so deep into it.
But there's an Old Testament that led up to him. So without all that, he's pimping off the Old Testament a little bit, So in the same way that hip-hop is an amalgamation...
Has anybody ever said the phrase pimping off the Old Testament? I need to know, because if not, we're making shirts.
It's a quotable. So in the same way... hip hop is absolutely sort of an amalgamation of all these different cultural influences from, worldwide. And Kool Herc was Jamaican, and they love to say that there was a whole Jamaican sound clash, and the DJing, was a Jamaican culture. But you got to look at the American influences when you go back to the Last Poets, you go back to Cab Calloway, you go back to James Brown, you go back to and then you can go back to Africa. The place, the cradle of civilization, and the griots, from back in the days. And so the drum circles, all of that stuff. So we're talking about hundreds of years of kind of coalescing diasporic influence that then flash pans in New York City in the 70s, again, over the course of some, months and years, that is recognized because you need a birthday. As August 11th, 1973, Kool Herc does a part. Actually, his sister, Cindy Campbell, organizes the party. It's a back-to-school jam, so give credit to the women, right? That's the real origin story. She put together a party. Her brother DJ'd it, and that became sort of the spiritual or the, emotional touch point where music was being played. Kool Herc was playing the breaks. There were dancers. There might have been someone on the mic kind of hyping the crowd at that party, and that became sort of the symbolic genesis.
Is that one of those parties where there were, in reality, like 250 people there, but like 3,500 people have given an account of being at that original party?
I've heard such things. I've also heard that it also got like so big that it was too big for the rec room inside, and it's spilled out into the streets. So that's part of the problem. And it's a longer conversation about, as you said, hip hop scholarship.
Did anybody ascend to heaven that night that we know of?
No, but I think there was a baptism of some sort. No, it was just, again, in history, it was there was a flyer that everyone's seen, this like kind of handwritten flyer that if you look into it, and I'm speaking from memory here, but it's not the actual flyer. It was something that was created later, but now attributed to it. So there's a lot of things happening in this culture that are now being, sort of archaeologically, investigated and not taken as fact, as you might have suggested.
Okay, so let's have the conversation of the obvious intersection there to ask about race, perceived race, and then whose culture ethnically, nationally is aligned with hip hop culture. So is it? So how do we put the black experience in the United States into that context? How do we talk about whether or not if a white person coming into this culture is a participant in that culture, is that co-opting it, or is hip hop inviting of all perceived ethnicities, races, nationalities into the culture?
Right, which was my point that was being not contested, but saying I called it a very I called it a very inclusive, perhaps the most inclusive culture, social movement in the world ever. I'll come back to that. So first and foremost, and again, this is currently being debated, or I don't say debated, argued, investigated. So hip hop is a black American creation. There's some discussion as to how much.
Are you talking about the music now?
I'm talking about
the culture.
Both.
Okay.
To be generally speaking.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the music and how the music evolved from soul and disco, and then the rapping from these parties, these were, for the most part, black New Yorkers in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Now, there's some debate as to, because certainly Latino, Puerto Ricans, they were there rocking, doing their thing too. Obviously, a lot of people early breaking. You would think of, you think of
Electric Boogaloo,
right? And you think of Hispanic folk, Latinos getting down. Absolutely, they're early and involved in the beginnings of the culture and
the way that I interpreted
movements.
it is if you were willing to get on the floor, then you were part of the black hip hop movement. But if you just popped or locked, you were probably from the Latin expression of it.
I mean, right. So some would have those. So, and again, so there's actually sort of a little bit of a heated debate, and it's a little bit divisive within. All these things have little things within them. Whether to basically to give credit as co-creators. Mm-hmm. To the Latinos, Hispanics that were in the area as well.
Makes sense.
And so there's an argument that we were there from the beginning. They're like, oh, you were there from the beginning, but we were the beginning. So there's a whole thing. But primarily, so what I usually say when I do talks or whatever is, and must not be forgotten, created by black and brown Americans, right? Has to be said, and because in this country we have a wonderful history of whitewashing everything that black and brown people have made artistically, from rock and roll to everything else. So
and I think part of that is part of the conflation in the minds of people that are just observers and not part of the culture is it's the same co-opting of a music culture such as jazz or the blues or what have you. And that's why I think, like I said, even I get lazy about my interpretation and conflation of rap and hip hop. So breaking it out as a culture is really interesting, but trying to understand the intersection between this was something that is its origins are in the black and brown people of this country specifically. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't belong to all, not all black and brown people are part of hip hop culture. That doesn't necessarily have to be that either. Right? I mean, am I thinking about that correctly?
Yes, I think there's now, because it's evolved. So we're talking about 50 years now. Hip hop's been around for 50 years in some form or fashion. Again, from this origin point that there was some hip hop elements that were coalescing before, some that didn't come till later. You didn't have commercial rap. I mean, Rapper's Delight was 1979. So you have this wide gap of time before it. So it really has this arc of coming together, right?
Is that considered the first pop hit?
It's
first crossover hit.
Yes. Well, it may. I don't know if it's the first recorded actual rap album. There's been rap in music. If you go back to the Fatback Band, or there's a song called Kim Tim the Third. There's a Pigfoot. I can't remember the name. You guys can Google it. But there's been other rap-ish kind of rap.
Expressions of rap.
Sure.
Yeah.
But as a record that's just rap, and certainly the one that obviously
like Gil Heron
took off. Gil Scott Heron does but that's more like spoken word. Last Poets were spoken word. So some of these, so 1979 Rapper's Delight was the next sort of genesis, right? The next launching point. But I say all that to say, initially what it was. So there's to me there's this sort of Venn diagram. Black culture. Actual black culture, right, which is a separate thing, and hip hop culture. And most of it is kind of intertwined. We get hip hop culture from black culture. It's, all the sayings that you hear and all the, it comes from there, kind of either evolves into the music and it's amplified. So every saying you get, it's all good. Yes, queen, all that stuff, whatever you might hear that's a black expression usually gets amplified through the music or the musicians. Like I say, now we got reality TV stars who are rappers, but you get Cardi B from Love and Hip Hop, and then you get Cardi B's music, but it's still hip hop culture, but it's still black culture, it's still Hispanic culture. So there's this mixture of all things. But on the other part of that hip hop side of the Venn diagram are people who are not black, who are not Hispanic, who are not, of the communities from whence hip hop came traditionally, and they are participants, if not sometimes monetarily, they're business people, they're execs, or whatever, that kind of run the music business, but they're not the real people in that diagram. The real people are people like me, people that come from different areas of the different demographics, different backgrounds, and they authentically connect with the artistic, linguistic, stylistic, all the things that make that culture a culture. And they connect authentically. Now, if you pick me up as a baby and in America, I'm born here, and my family lives in Japan. We live in Tokyo for whatever reason. And as a baby, I grew up in Japan, and for 20 years, I'm in Japan. As a 21-year-old, I'm Japanese culture. I'm immersed. I don't know anything else. This is my life. This is what I'm connected to. I'm not Japanese by heritage, by blood, but I'm pretty Japanese, culturally.
Right.
Now, I could abuse that. I could, misappropriate that. See, cultural appropriate, we use that term cultural appropriation, but I always think it's more like it should be cultural misappropriation, right? We all appropriate culture. Everyone does. In
cultural assimilation.
Sure. So in the same way, if you're culturally, aligned, immersed, as I would be in Japan, if you're immersed in hip hop culture, if you're really authentically connected to that, then you're a part of this culture, regardless of your skin tone, background, ethnicity. Proof of this is that it's worldwide. There's hip hop everywhere. So how can we discount cultural citizens, participants that live in France and Germany and Peru and Australia? There's literally, I looked at it, there's a whole list of, all the countries in the world, and there's one I never heard of. And I didn't even know this is a country. I couldn't even tell you right now. It starts with a V. That's all I remember. And it's like somewhere in the, the South Philippines, all the island nations.
Happens. Right? There's a lot of countries. Okay. Right? It's like asking, what? Can you name every congressperson?
Right.
I have no idea.
So I find one. I never heard of it. I Google hip hop in, Vernutishnu. And I get a video.
Be careful what you say about the Vernutishans.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Listen, all love to the Vernutisha squad. I don't want no beef. And Google pulls up some guy breaking out in Vernutishu. So I'm in the street. So by definition, it's a culture. And by definition of expansion and by electricity, remember you used to say by electricity because it's connected. By electricity, you can be part of that culture no matter who you are or where you're from. And I don't know that there's anything else that really welcomes everybody in the world, regardless of, I know you hate that, regardless of, your nationality, your background, your skin color, your language, your religion, your ideology, your thought process, your whether you're disabled or not. There's a whole movement of disabled folk doing hip hop that's absolutely, in its essence, doesn't always work this way in reality, but on paper, nothing more inclusive.
Okay, so beyond just
now I'm preaching.
Beyond just a clever title, beyond the fact that you're tapped into something that is pretty universally understood, I think now way more appreciated than it used to be, and people now having an idea that this isn't just music, it's an expression of culture, and now there's a heritage attached to it because it's been 50 years.
Right.
So you are tapping into something, but you make a pretty bold statement just in the title of the show
right.
that it can also save America. So as we are, this is a great intersection for us because we are unfucking the Republic.
Right. Unfucking hip hop was not available.
It was.
No.
All right. No. So maybe I registered everything under the sun.
Happened.
No. But to the extent that you have your thesis statement within the title of the show.
Right.
What was the genesis for that? Like, what was the idea behind doing that particular? Because you could have just done a hip hop critique show. Mm-hmm. You could have done a historical show. I mean, you could, and I've seen you lecture on a pretty vast array of topics. Right. But you specifically wanted to lean into the socio-political aspect of hip hop and how it can, I guess, influence events. Can you expand for Unfucking the Republic audience? Can you expand on the general thesis of the show?
Yes. So it is a lofty idea, right? And we may need, and I often say, we may need more than just hip hop. Certainly, it's not like this is the panacea. Is that right?
The panacea, indeed.
Yeah. No, Pangea. I don't know. Anyway, a quick step back is when, as an independent journalist covering hip hop in the New York area for many years, I ran a Birthplace magazine. I was kind of this self-employed savior of music, hip hop music and culture in New York City when the traditional outlets, the mainstream hip hop outlets had gone to other parts of the country that were exploding at the time, Houston, Atlanta, etc. And New York hip hop, New York being this mecca, as it's known, of hip hop, wasn't getting the attention it deserved. Yet there were still great things happening in New York, just like there is anywhere. There's a great indie scene in every city in the world. But New York has some pretty formidable, exciting talent. Things were happening. So I was covering it for a while. And what I started realizing...
I saw you talking to the great Silent Night about Don't Sleep on Long Island, too.
That's right, 100%. Right.
Pretty cool.
Your little subsections. He's from New Brunswick, New Jersey. New Brunswick has a historic... There's some music... Like they're known as a college town. Rutgers is there. My mother's hometown is New Brunswick. They have a music scene there, and they have a hip-hop scene there. And it doesn't get a lot of credit, but if you... As he said, if you're traveling from Philly to New York... You're probably going to have a stop in New Brunswick. So in the 90s, all the artists were rolling through New Brunswick. Right. So, and performing at Rutgers. So, and these regions get, unsung sometimes. But what I was running into were folks that were artists. They were performing. They were going to Freestyle Mondays. Shouts to them. They just celebrated 22-year anniversary of what once was a weekly, then a monthly, now like a yearly showcase. But a fantastic, long-standing, heritage, historic, showcase series in New York that was built on freestyle rap battles. And people who are in that show are brilliant. You have to actually freestyle on stage in a battle. So it's like there's a live band. They spin a wheel, and it'd be a topic. Food group. Like, okay, you're a shark. You're a plankton. Go.
That amazes me.
And then off the top of the head, he'd be like, you're a shark. Yeah, everyone's scared of you, but I'm plankton. I feed all the ocean creatures. You're just a feature. So
that stuff. I mean.
And I'm telling you,
I'm always amazed.
Like I can do it, but I've said this without equivocation. Some of the most brilliant people I've ever met are freestyle rappers that have been on stage at Freestyle Mondays. I just saw some of them yesterday.
It's an art, man.
Man, listen, it all uses a different part of your brain. It's a whole thing. We could have a whole talk on that. What I find is that some people at that show, because they're really smart, happen to be teachers.
Oh wow, yeah.
Or they're working as with juvenile in a juvenile detention center, and they go in, and on the weekends they have workshops, poetry or rap writing with with young people who are kind of locked up for whatever reasons, and having these workshops, self-esteem, self-confidence, storytelling, expression, verbalization, like all these side benefits that you get from rapping, which people don't give a lot of credit to, like all of those things, social anxiety, like all these things, it's less anxiety, all these things are improved by being. I always say, like, every failed wannabe rapper is a better public speaker. Can lead meetings at work better because they've been in front of people. They've lost that fear that all of us have, being in front of people. Anyway, so I find people that are doing those things, and I'm learning those things that I just talked about by watching them or talking to them, and I'm like, oh. Then I come across programs like Fresh Prep, which is a test prep. In New York, we have the Regents exams. And every year, the kids got to take the Regents exams. And you have these troubled kids in these, underfunded school districts that, under-resourced and underloved, and they're having trouble passing these tests. So they start, this is a New York City program. It's defunct now, but at the time, they brought in an artist, teaching artist, rapper, to construct songs about the material, right? And because we learn by memorizing, and we learn songs, we memorize songs better than we memorize paragraphs. These kids that had previously failed, sometimes multiple times, 88% of them ended up passing.
Well,
afterwards.
I mean, I'm thrilled the program's defunct. Yeah.
It's a longer story. But there are other programs like it. Science Genius exists and does the same thing through science classes. And they actually battle. So not only do you have to really be into this, you can't just do a song about science and I made a rap about science and then okay, here, turn it in, here you go, teacher, right? You have to get on stage and perform it, which means you better know it, which means you better have a command of the content, which means you really know your science in 8th grade, 9th grade. Come on, we were like mitochondria, I don't know, but they're putting it into the and I could talk forever, but I'll just give you one quick anecdote. And then and you said, how do I think that it can save America? It's all leading up to it. In the Science Genius program, shouts to Dr. Christopher Emden, who's a brilliant educator, and he's led he's been the face of this hip-hop ed movement, right? If you go on Twitter, hashtag hip-hop ed, they have a weekly chat on Twitter, on X, and there's teachers all across the country that kind of ascribe to this idea, hip-hop education, and it goes deeper. Science Genius says, okay, you got to battle, you do all these things, you get on stage, and then your class battles the other science class in the school, and then the school battles the other school down the block. So imagine at the end, it's an auditorium filled with students, teachers, friends, all cheering on kids on stage rapping about science. I mean, like, yeah, and they're giving out.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Cool.
Now, here's the greatest thing. I said, what was the one that stands out to you? And they told me the story. They said this young lady did her rap was about biology, human biology, and what happens when you're poisoned. Okay, so in rap form, she describes how you first, you have this feeling and you're unwell, and then, you start having these symptoms and different things happen, and then what's happening to your organs as each organ starts to fail and it's connected to the other organ, and then your heart. So she goes through this great whole thing about what happens to the human. So it's brilliant on its own. Come to find out, they said, well, how, what is this all about? Or somewhere in the song, she's using it as a metaphor for having broken up with her boyfriend and how it makes her feel.
It's incredible.
So I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. So not only does she obviously have a greater understanding of the subject matter, his whole point of this was to do better in science class, but she was able to get something off her chest, out of her chest, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to be metaphoric too, that she may never otherwise had the opportunity to do so. So then I start meeting mental health professionals that are saying, oh, we use hip hop all the time. I built a studio in a room, half this size in the Bronx in this high school. They gave me a little grant money. And now kids come and they work out their trauma because they live in the middle of the Bronx where the people are fresh, but where there's a lot of stuff going on. And they're able to come in and make songs and put their feelings out. And I'm a trained therapist, so I'm able to work with them, work out their drama. But they love coming to the studio. Everyone loves coming to the studio, and everyone likes to rap or pretend they can rap. So we turn that into something, and it's, and that's a heralded program. So I'm meeting all these people doing this right here in New York. And then I realized this is happening everywhere. So I had to sunset my New York focus and start the Center for Hip Hop Advocacy, which is an organization I wanted to build to house some of this information. Mm-hmm. So as a journalist, I was writing stuff. The next obvious, thing to do was a podcast, and call it this because, well, what does America need? I mean, if you look at it from a progressive angle like we always do, well, we need equality and equity and better education and more opportunity for poor people and for people who haven't had resources. So I'm saying if your school is underfunded and I could bring in educational programs and I will take your underfunded, under-resourced, and underloved students and propel them, because all of this stuff has the receipts and all, you can see it. You can see their better grades, 86% passed. You're seeing their advancement, their engagement is up, their grades are up. And that's just in this one test pilot, Title I school that they got a grant to do. Well, number one, that can help every kid, because whether you like it or not, your kid likes hip hop. America, like, whether you like it or not, hip hop. That's the thing. They're like, I don't want hip hop in the schools. Hip hop's in the schools. It's in your students. It's already there.
Right.
But by ignoring it or pretending that or not pretending, sometimes you do pretend, but sometimes you're not aware of all of its positive attributes. You're doing a disservice at best, and at worst, as Chris Emdin will say, you're harming your children. You're committing violence against your children if you say you love them and you're not exploring these avenues that takes their culture into consideration.
Right, you're denying their culture. You're denying,
right,
a huge part of who they are.
Right, which again, that's harmful. So we can, and when I have mental health professionals that are saying, oh, they won't say it because they're not going to, there's no way to measure this necessarily, but they're like, kids have come up to me or my patients have come up to me and say, you changed my life. You saved my life. There's a saying that goes amongst the hip hop community, hip hop saved my life. And it's a thing that organically you'll hear from different people. It's not like it's not like a slogan.
Right.
So, okay. And I could give you 400 more examples. So if that's the case, and all these things lead to more opportunities, people who teach financial literacy to kids through hip hop, something you're not getting in your school. And you talk about politics. So Dr. Bettina Love has a program called Hip Hop Civics Ed, because we're not getting civics taught in school anymore. You're certainly not getting it in black and brown or poor communities. So here's a program that if you wanted to, you could purchase the curriculum, start up your own workshops, invite kids from your locale, and teach them civics through hip hop, through this program that she developed.
I remember you and I went to a seminar in the city with, you introduced me to friends of yours in Rebel Diaz.
Yes.
And they
Right.
gave a seminar. It was a civic seminar through the lens of hip hop, explored redlining, redistricting, funding, political structures within an urban environment.
Right.
All through the lens of hip hop and how the culture developed through that time.
Yep. It can teach you all of that, and it can give you
so eye-opening, and it was so well done and so well constructed.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: when you're asked to, so you go all around the country, you speak at colleges and you speak at seminars and events and stuff like that. When you're speaking to in a university setting, let's say, what's the thing that having done this and been pretty practiced at it, where do you know you're going to get them and finally hook them when you're in front of them? What resonates with your university audience between, where the faculty looks at you and the kids look at you and they're like, wow. What's the hook?
It depends on the situation. Sometimes we're in a academic conference. If it's a hip hop conference, then it's a lot of preaching to the choir goes on at these things, unless you're like, debuting research and you actually done like a real research survey, which there's more and more of that happening, which is great. There's more. The literature now has a lot more, actual hip hop scholarship and research. But a lot of it is also I'm investigating something. They're not always so opinionated. So in a hip hop surrounding, I try not to rehash what everyone kind of already knows. So for that audience, and part of the work that I do is that the things I'm saying to you and to the unfuckers today might be eye-opening. I never thought about hip-hop in all these different ways. I've never heard of this. I've never heard of this. So, excuse me. I get so excited. So part of the work is obviously getting this out to the general public because we're not in positions of green lighting. We can't, if we're in a school setting, we can't sign off on, we're not there to sign. Someone's there signing off on this project that could help kids. But if they have a negative perception of hip hop, then they're not going to be the ones. So we're not there. So, okay. The problem is that a lot of people that consider themselves hip hop don't know these things either. So if I'm in an academic setting and we're talking about, a lot of them are historic, especially this year. Everything's been history. The history of hip-hop. And as we talked about, the heritage and these discussions about, who started what, where, when, and how. And there was a seminal book, Jeff Chang's Can't Stop, Won't Stop, which is a great book, great primer, and been like the book. But there are others who say, well, let's now, because now we have podcasts. Now we can get the elders and pioneers are still alive. So we can get a lot of them to tell their stories that maybe when Jeff wrote the book, and Jeff's great, didn't have access to. So there's a lot of that this year. So where they're doing history, I'm doing future. When you're talking about Hip Hop 50, I want to talk about Hip Hop 51. I want to say what's happening. What are we doing collectively, or what do we need to do as a society, as a hip hop community to move forward? Because we could talk about this all the way, and we could have these arguments about today's music versus yesterday's music. Oh, it's ad nauseum. It's ridiculous. You're 40 years old. And the best you can do when you talk about hip hop is I don't like Ice Spice. But my thing is, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a whatever. How can you incorporate hip hop into your work environment? Right. What do you mean? Well, what do I mean? What do I mean? Are you first of all, if you're an educator and you're not doing this, then do you really love this culture? But but you don't know. They don't know either. So when I point some of these things that I just talked about today, these intersections that they know are happening, but they don't always know are happening. I think academic circles generally are not surprised by it, but you also have to tell them, a lot of the knowledge comes from folks from the culture that went through the educational process. But a lot of it lives outside of the walls of academia. I'm no less intelligent about hip hop or versed in it, than any of those PhDs. I don't have a degree. Right. A person who's been involved in the culture, who's been a performer, a teacher, a mentor, but never in an academic setting, is just as vital to preserving, protecting, and promoting the culture, that's the thing I get across. We have to analyze, historical records. Now there's archives, there's museums, great. But we have to protect and move forward. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, how we spend our time in these institutions. So I think for the academics, it's always like, yes, study, go back, dig up, you know, archive and all that. But also, are we bringing students up to understand that there's more you can do that's forward thinking with the culture?
Right.
So shouts to Dr. Lauren Kelly at Rutgers. She does a yearly, I'm part of this program. She got a big grant for it. I'm a mentor. It's called the HipHop Youth Research and Activism Conference. Happens every year. It's like first and second year college students that run the conference. We just sit back and kind of mentor and guide, and then we come and do a couple of things. They call in for proposals, and the proposals by college students, and they put together the panels and the discussions and the performances, and they do it all with the idea that research and activism, not just historic, you know,
right.
archiving, you know, recorded history, research and activism for the future, for the betterment of society as a whole, because I make this argument that hip hop can save rural white America too, because again, these are tried and true practices that work across the board, but most importantly, to help rectify the disparity in the communities from whence hip hop came. I don't know if I answered the question, but I hope I.
Yeah, no, it's evolving. Mm-hmm. It's new. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, 50 years is not a long time.
It's something being designed. So, you know, there is no specific answer to it other than, you know, seeing what resonates the most with people and where you're going to get these touch points, you know?
And when it's people who don't know anything about hip hop, then my guess is, and from what people told me, that their minds get blown. I do a hip hop and technology talk, and I've done it in front of technology companies or conferences where, you know, that industry is not filled with a lot of hip hop heads, let's just say, right? And I do this whole presentation about the intersection throughout history of hip hop and technology and all the advancements that have come, not just in music, but in digital media, in streaming and all that stuff, how it evolved from mixtapes to now, you know, these sites and to SoundCloud and to now streaming services. I connect all those dots to hip hop. Mm-hmm. Guerrilla marketing in this new digital landscape. I do a whole thing about how, you know, hip hop's always been the remix, right? The remix culture. We take something that's made for one thing, and they either don't give us access to it, and I'm using the royal us, but certainly, you know, folks, you know, from these communities, you don't get the access, you don't get the resource. I mean, hip hop was built off of these things. You don't have any of the resource. You don't have music programs in your school, so we don't have instruments. So we have record players.
Incredible.
And so we find the break in the middle of the record where there's no singing, so that we could sing over it, and we create impromptu instrumentals because we don't have access. So they're like, oh yeah, you're sampling and you're stealing other music. Yeah, right, out of necessity, some other invention, right? Mm-hmm. So hip hop does this all over the place, and so it's that intersection happens all through with technology. And it's like an hour and a half keynote, and at the end, the revelation there is, now let's go back to why aren't there hip hop heads in this industry? Why aren't you hiring them?
Right.
These are geniuses that have upended every industry. Yeah. Turn on your TV. I was watching, I forget what commercial it was. Oh, Angie's List. Today, in the hotel, about to come here. Angie, you can do this when you Angie that. You can do this when you Angie that. And it's like the people are hanging out while the Angie workers are working on their house. It's an advertising. If you turn on TV and don't hear rap influencing advertising, it's upended that industry. It's upended fashion. It's upended the music industry is on its head.
And how many of those tech geeks have been sitting there coding with their headphones on, listening to hip hop all these years?
100%. But when you make the connection, so when you say, what do they resonate with the most? When I've done that talk, I've had people say, we need more talks like this. You know, you got to listen to, like, this is and because I hope that then they go back and say, well, you know, we need to expand our talent pool, you know? Mm-hmm. And the other problem is that there aren't a lot of people, again, don't have access to become programmers. So they're geniuses, but they're not coding. So hip hop helps with that. Shouts to Summer, again, the consulting producer for this show, who has an organization called Hip Hop Hacks, which arranged hackathons. So when you say you learned all this political, socioeconomic, historical stuff from Rebel Diaz, we could teach you anything through hip hop. And we teach computer programming through hip hop. Another organization called Breakbeat Code that I've seen in 4 hours, in one afternoon, A 14-year-old kid who never even thought about computer programming as a thing, didn't even know it existed. It was like they're geeky and nerdy and they like computers. And someone says, we're going to teach you hip hop. We're going to teach you programming through hip hop. And they're like, I like hip hop. I like computers. Sure, let's go. And in 4 hours, this kid is using Python, which is a programming language. It's a whole workshop, bunch of kids. Again, no experience. And they're building beats. Loops, and they're pulling these loops from a repository, and they're stacking them, and go for 4 bars, go for 8 bars, bring in the guitars, bring in the bass line, but it's not drag and drop. They have to do it by programming.
That's awesome.
And in 4 hours, these kids have built beats
because they want that answer.
Right.
They want to figure that out.
They want to figure that out,
yeah.
And they're all like, "When are we doing this? When are we doing this again?"
Yeah.
So through hip hop, we can use programs like that to give the kids the skills and the interest. And through hip-hop, I can inspire the tech companies and the executives and the people that are hiring to look for them and make that connection. So when you say there's disparities, racial, economic in the country where people don't have access to X, we can do that through hip-hop. If we don't have education standards that are up to the level of the world, we can do that through hip-hop. If you want, and we won't talk about it because I don't know if you've heard there's a conflict going on in the world, but those folks at Next Level that I talked about early on that work with the U.S. State Department and they go overseas as cultural ambassadors, they purposefully go to conflict regions. And they're not going there like teaching, we're not spreading democracy all across the world, like butter. Your bush is better than mine. Pause. But, but they're actually in that, working together, that collaborative. You teach us about the way you do hip hop. We're not coming from America. This is the way you do hip hop. Right. Tell us. Right. And there's a whole bunch of tenets in their work that teach you how to resolve conflict. So we maybe can save the world. And people would say, hip hop can save the world. I know that's the next podcast. You'll give me a break. You have to support this one first. And if you support this one at my Patreon, patreon.com/Manny Faces, maybe we'll get somewhere and do the other one. But yes, I actually think it can save the world. Now I got to
put that graphic up on the screen.
I got to compete with Buy Me a Coffee. But listen, so when it comes to, and again, I'm preaching, but if you give me a societal ill, I'm looking to be able to connect the dot directly to how hip-hop can help alleviate and in some cases eliminate that societal ill.
It would be unbelievable to resolve conflicts through rap battles.
It's one
that
way
would be amazing.
One way to do it. That's what hip-hop started as. If you go to the origin story, the gangs and the violence and the things, and then it's Africa Bambaataa, who is problematic but also has this historical relevancy that they brought together opposing crews. And this is how they started kind of handling their beefs.
So let me move to politics because you and I in show notes crossed over and touched on something that is relevant to this upcoming election. And this will be this will not be artfully crafted. So because I want to be careful with my language. So bear with me trying to get through this question. But one of the first areas that I was concerned about, and am now more concerned about with RFK Jr., for example, coming as an independent, is that the Kennedy name, and specifically Robert Kennedy's name, still has a lot of resonance within the older Black community. That name is very, very vital because it was. They were a seminal force during the civil rights movement, and I think there is an understanding that way more than JFK, that RFK was the one that actually wanted to move things forward and progress. But he's also been able to tap into, we had a lot of back and forth about Chappelle's specials, right? Right before the controversial specials on transgenderism, he had the special that came out when Trump won the election, We've Been on That special. Right. And when he talks about a lot of the things that I think white Americans were waking up to, he had the refrain, his comedic refrain through it. It's like, we've been on that. Right. Like, you're just now seeing this. We've been on that. So some of the things that some of the more, I'll call them conspiratorial elements, that because that's how I think a lot of white Americans are phrasing the things that are important to RFK's movement specifically. Right. Vaccine hesitancy. Mm-hmm. we've been on that. So in the black culture, there's been a tremendous amount of literature about hesitancy because black people in this country have been experimented on. Sure. I mean, we talked about the birth of gynecology. I mean, it came specifically through trials on enslaved people. So the
Tuskegee and all the other things.
The Tuskegee trials, and also even just the different outcomes within hospital systems when a black person is admitted for something versus a white person. There's vastly different outcomes. Yep. We had a great guest in a prior life on a different show where that talked about the concept of weathering. It wasn't me. It was your show. It was on Newsbeat.
Yes.
They talked about the concept of weathering.
Weathering, yeah.
And I think it was a sociological concept that was developed in the 1970s. It said that black people in America specifically, different than black people anywhere else in the world, had higher levels of anxiety and stress that led to hypertension, led to diabetes, earlier onset of diabetes, incidents of heart attacks and all those kind of things because of the pressure of being black in our society versus being black somewhere else in the world. So the idea that there would be vaccine hesitancy, which is just a reflection of a mistrust that's in the healthcare system, is something very real. And that's why I say I hesitate when I say conspiratorial, because it's conspiratorial in the generalized white culture, but it's not conspiratorial because the black culture has evidence to back up that the outcomes are different within the medical system and the healthcare system.
Very fair.
Mistrust and distrust of law enforcement.
I was just about to say, like, it's so funny that now you want to defund the FBI? Right. We've been on that.
Right.
Like, we've been saying the FBI is corrupt, which obviously is a blanket statement and all that, but black people are like...
So that was the purview of black and progressive circles, that that authority, there would always be overreach whenever there was a consolidation of power, and any of the the racist roots in particular of the FBI as it relates to the indigenous population as an example.
Fair.
But then turned, early on to attack the black community. The ATF. Again, there's another seminal Newsbeat episode interviewing Johan Hari talking about
the war on drugs.
The war on drugs, right? Yeah. And the war on, starting with a slight from Billie Holiday. Like, this stuff has deep roots. That is conspiratorial in white culture. It is very real within black culture. Yeah. So the long and artful introduction to this question is, you and I have spoken off mic about what is happening in the black community as seen through the auspices of rap artists specifically, who have expressed this through art and through music. All of the things that we just talked about are known within the black community because they've been able to amplify it through music and through song and through dialogue, right? So vaccines might kill you. They might give you autism. Doctors are going to treat you poorly. If you're not wealthy, don't trust the law. This is how you have to act in front of law enforcement. That is spread throughout a culture through the auspices of rap music and hip hop. And now I think we're just beginning. I'm taking white culture, the royal we here, are just beginning to understand that there are prominent members of the rap community that are not just newly coming into this type of talk, but here's my question. There's an intersection now with the far right, that has accepted hip hop culture to a degree, and those what they consider that not conspiratorial elements. They have a fundamental mistrust of the government. It's a very libertarian mindset that plays out all throughout rural America. And hip hop is 50 years old, and they don't have the same disdain for rap music and hip hop. As a matter of fact, it is not uncommon to see images of, people riding around in pickup trucks listening to fucking hip hop, right? I mean,
there's a whole subgenre of hick hop.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, sure.
So now we have this mess, right? Where it was so much easier to identify white people, black people, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican now.
Right.
I think it's healthy to a degree because in a way it's parliamentary, right? But in another way, it's really kind of confused all the angles and the lenses and the prognostications you can make. So now you've got Dr. Cornel West, one of the most progressive, and considered one of the brightest lights in the intellectual progressive movement, running as an independent. You've got RFK with that name and all of this other stuff that does appeal not just to this white contingent of libertarian right-wingers,
Right.
but he's saying a lot of stuff that resonates with the black community that they've been saying through the auspices of rap music for a long time.
Sure.
And he's a fucking Kennedy.
Yep.
So, when people are saying, oh, he's going to steal more from Trump, I'm like, I don't know, man, because you've got Dr. West out there.
Right.
You got a lot of people like me that are like, fuck yeah, let's go, right? I've gone into that enough. I don't have to talk about that, swing state and all that kind of stuff. But
he's not stealing your vote from Trump.
He's not, and I'm voting for Cornel West because Biden's going to carry if he lives in New York. Anyway, so the long question is, inside right now, how are people talking about politics through hip hop? Because one thing about you that I love, among thousands of things, one thing that I love is
Only
that
thousands?
there's a limited amount of time.
Millions, no? Okay, go ahead. If we just talk about kids, it's thousands.
I do love all your kids, and that's about 1,000. One thing I love that you're always careful to express is there's a lot of great hip hop happening today. I get it with the past, but look at this underground artist. I mean, you've unearthed so many independent, on the ground hip hop artists that are breaking new ground every single day.
Right.
What are they saying?
Right.
So your ears is to the ground. What's happening out there?
Yeah. and
is that even a fucking question?
I mean,
it's a thesis.
What's happening out there?
What's going on? What are you hearing?
So it's like saying all these things and say, "What do you think?" And I'm like, is there a question? Because it's a very interesting thing that's happening, and part of it, and honestly, I as you know, I've given you and the work we do here a lot of credit because it helps me see these things in a different light where I might have not noticed a pattern before.
Yeah. So
when you say the right, the people on the right, like hip hop, they might, they to a degree, right? As black folk like to say, is like you love the culture, but you don't love the people.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the same as they would have listened to jazz or they would have listened to blues, right?
Right.
They don't have to like who's playing it, but they would invite them to come play for them.
Right, but not to dinner.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that. The way I came into this sort of to look at this intersection, and okay, so certainly there are two things in your question. The one is, all the great hip hop that's being done now and all this stuff. And I do want to, and maybe I'll come back to it, but I do want to say that hip hop gets this new reputation of not having its old reputation of it was once this counterculture, this, go against the man, go against the system. Again, we just talked about earlier how hip hop created was totally come in the back door, and do things differently, do it our own way. You can't stop us. We can do it anyway. And that's at the DNA of hip hop.
It's like when I was lamenting, where's the soundtrack to the revolution?
Right.
When we were,
right.
Doing Occupy together, and you're like, it's hip hop. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, and look, you're not the only one. Questlove, who is a much admired, and we love Questlove. I have to preface this. I have no problem with him. We'll call people out in the culture. Questlove, during right after Ferguson, right after Michael Brown was killed by police in Ferguson, he put out, and there was some time after that. I think it was like later that year, 4 or 5 months. And he put out an Instagram post basically saying what you said. We need more protest music. We need more emphatic anthem, because it doesn't have to be fight the power, but I need to see our artists doing things. I know when the Dixie Chicks did it, they were blacklisted, and so he's bringing up all these things, and he goes, I'm talking to all musicians, but specifically to my hip hop.
It's an unbelievably mainstream take.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about, so here's my point. This is very interesting you say that. So then he says, but I'm speaking specifically to my hip hop artists. Like that's us. That's our lane. Why aren't we doing that? We need new Public Enemies. We need new da-da-da-da-da. So I said, oh, that's interesting. To your point, that I know of a bunch of people that are doing a bunch of things. So I responded, I use it in a couple of my talks, and I say, well, here's the problem, Quest. From the point that Michael Brown got killed to the point that you released that Instagram post, here are 8 songs released by mainstream artists. I'm talking about Diddy, The Game, De La Soul featuring Chuck D from the old Public Enemy. They put out songs about Michael Brown. And what you just did is, give them no
not
love.
Good enough, yeah.
That not even that you don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens is 1 million people who follow Questlove is like, yeah, man, that's right. Yo, hip hop used to be about that, yo. Yo, hip hop doesn't do that anymore, man. That's why I don't even listen to new hip hop. And I just gave you 8. And those were known artists, and I did that purposely because I could give you 1,000 that are not known. You don't think Rebel Diaz was still making music about Ferguson? And
right.
His name's gonna slip my mind. Oh my God, Tef Poe from St. Louis was doing protest music before, during, and after, and he's right there. He knows it. Who then went on to get a fellowship, the Nasir Jones, named after Nas, the artist, the Nasir Jones Fellowship at the African American Research Center at Harvard University. He went on to become a fellow there. And Questlove,
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and some Harvard. You have to say Harvard. So now you recognize it, right? When I say Harvard, now Harvard. Yeah. And I've spoken there once or twice, but you're discounting all of that.
I'll just catch the humble brag
with with dismissing all of this by saying we don't do that anymore. So I do want to say that obviously there are artists, some of them mainstream, but my personal take is I don't care if you jump on the protest bandwagon and put out a song protesting somebody that, no, I don't care. You weren't doing that before. That's not your lane. Stay in your lane. You know what I mean? I don't need Jay-Z to make a song about, something that's happening. I do need him to continue funding Khalif Browder documentaries and bailing people out of jail and doing some of the criminal justice reform stuff that he may or may not be doing. Longer story. But I don't need to make a song. That's not impactful. What's impactful? Go ahead.
So what's happening today, though?
Okay. So, right. I just wanted to give credit and say that all that stuff is ongoing, and it's there's still these things happening. So when I talk about the Hip Hop Civics Ed program, these things are still in existence. There are small grassroots organizations in every place, probably in every city, that are hip hop oriented. So you remember, it's not just music; it's a culture, right? So if we have a young, kind of with it, organization that's on the ground. There's a huge one called the Hip Hop Caucus, which is going around, and their main focus is environment, climate change. And they're very focused on merging those two worlds. They speak at panels, they speak at entertainment panels, they bring artists who are, into the cause, into the movement. They get funding, they send out newsletters, they ask, sign this pledge, write your congressman, right? So this is happening all over the place. I actually shared the stage in front of the Capitol building with Representative Sidney Kamliger Dove. She's from California. She put in a United States House resolution declaring, the 50th year of hip hop. So it was like a, celebratory kind of resolution. But at that at that press event was the Hip Hop Caucus, and they were there, and they're doing these things in D.C. So these organizations exist. They're trying to get the political message out. They're trying to get people involved. They're to be involved politically, civically. But what we're fighting is the same thing that progressivism is fighting. You have social media, misinformation, disinformation. You have these conspiratorial elements. Kyrie Irving was pushing the same vaccination stuff, right. and black folk were, yes, Kyrie's right. And I'm like, I see where you're coming from. Like, traditionally, these are things that you have to worry. I don't think in this case he's right. I think that because then we see greater damage in the black communities from people not getting vaccines, and that's during COVID, that was tragic. We did stories about that in Newsbeat and how worse off black communities were because they come in with all these pre-existing weathering PTSD caused conditions, and so we're battling that. And I think the answer, the way to save or to educate or to inform or to involve or to inspire, is the grassroots small organizations.
But let me ask this even tighter, because there's two ways that the black electorate in the United States impacts the outcome of elections, and they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a
black
bloc,
women especially. And
you could say that you don't want to treat the black vote as a monolith. I get it. Except that by the numbers, it's as monolithic as it gets. right?
Okay.
So, I mean, we're talking about upwards of 90% figures within the black community voting Democrat.
Right.
But how many
Right.
is typically how the vote is really exercised.
Correct.
Turnout is everything.
Yes.
So I guess my fear right now is I don't know that the Biden administration has done enough to connect. And I just said I'd ask this in a better, tighter way, right?
No, I'm agreeing with you in advance because I know where you're going with it, and I agree.
Anybody that wants to understand, I'm a fan of Brianna Joy Gray, right?
Yes, sure.
Watch her debate with Crystal and Kyle. It is so illuminating because there's so many parts of what Brianna is saying that they can't hear.
Right.
When I say that they can't hear it, it's like she's saying words and they're like, but that's just wrong.
Right.
Much like the vaccination argument where people are like, no, it doesn't. The medical community doesn't hurt you, it helps you. Like they can't hear it because of a place that I don't come from, but I can appreciate if I listen carefully.
Yes.
And I've listened the way that you've taught me to listen to certain things. Like if you pick up these things and you can pick up on the language of it, she was expressing something that they simply couldn't hear.
Right.
And it's the same expression that I feel that the Biden administration can't hear either.
Right.
Right.
And certainly can't relate. If you can't hear it or understand it, you don't know how to address it. Yeah.
And
no, they're not doing
anything. The Obama
anything.
administration also couldn't hear it.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
There is no administration. You would have to go back to Robert Kennedy to find somebody who heard it. LBJ knew the political advantages of it, but he couldn't hear it. So anyway, what I'm saying is like I think it could be a combination of it. Listen, if it's 2% that peels off and goes for RFK Jr. because he's on the Kennedy's on the ballot. And then if it's just X amount of people who stay home, I don't think that you see the Democrats are sitting back right now and they're licking their chops for the same reason that Crystal and Kyle sat there and couldn't hear Brianna's argument because they don't understand. There's a whole other thing happening out there. This isn't go up and have the barbecue. Late October, right? To get all the black vote lined up and then do nothing for the next 4 years, right?
And great thing was all the contestants that went on the Breakfast Club, during the primaries, the Democratic primaries, and the one that they showed, Charlemagne was really partial to was Pete Buttigieg. And then he said, no, we love you. Like, we love you. And then he went to South Carolina and got 0% of the vote. So it's like, no. And that's so, and we're talking about hip hop, but
that won't be the case for RFK.
No, I agree with you. In fact, and I don't know. So this is what, as you know, this is kind of what triggers it because I don't know how much of it is purposeful because we talk so much about the right seeding sentiment. Yeah. Right. And, turning 2 weeks to turn a 19-year-old radical right.
Yep.
Remember?
Yep.
What was it? The PragerU episode. So I hear about that stuff and I learn all this stuff, this great stuff that we do. And then I see that DJ Academics was a provocateur. He's a I don't know how to explain this guy. He's a media figure, but he loves to troll and to dabble in the negativity of hip hop, right? And listen, I haven't said it, we haven't gone there, but of course there's all the things that you don't like about hip hop in hip hop.
Sure.
Of course. He feeds off of that and amplifies it and creates an audience for that. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that watch his little online commentaries. He was banned from Twitch. He's big on Twitch. Just talking about stories and talking about all the beefs and, people who are using the music to attack other people, threaten them. The violence that comes out of that feeds off of it, which then perpetuates it. So when we talk about culture vultures, longer talk. But he was banned from Twitch. And
you got to be pretty fucked up.
You got to be pretty fucked up to be banned from Twitch, and like more than once. And when he was approached by Rumble.
Sure. The free speech platform.
Right. And 100%. Rumble said, "Come on to our site." He was like, "Yeah, we'll give you a bag. We'll give you money. Well, come on to the site. Well, you can host here." And he's like, "Yeah, so cool." Now, his audience isn't on Rumble. Like, in other words, he's not going to get more people.
Not yet.
Right. He's not going to get more people by being on Rumble. He's not going to increase his numbers. In fact, they'll drop because not everyone's going to come over to Rumble.
Sure.
But the ones that do are now in the Rumble ecosystem. Now your digital footprint is captured, and I could target you with all the seemingly innocuous PragerU type, things to try to sway your opinion to a group of people that we couldn't previously touch.
Yeah.
Black folk. Through hip-hop, through this dude.
Should I go get a bag of money from Rumble on fuckers and then just use that to fund?
You can do it. Go to Rumble. So now, that's something. Like, now, anyone who goes to DJ Academic's show on Rumble is now in the algorithm, and we could serve you. We could retarget you because I know about digital marketing. I know how you can retarget and and hit them on other platforms and follow them around the web and start serving them all this stuff. Like, I don't know, vaccines don't work, right? Give them a lot. Boost Kyrie Irving's post in the algorithm so that when probably a right wing, I don't think they plan exactly that RFK would be the guy, but like their right wing, Ron DeSantis. Runs and says, hey, vaccines, am I right, black folk? Mm-hmm. Black folk have now been, because they've been, so I don't know how purposeful that was to bring him in, but there's somebody at Rumble who's like, ooh, we could get black people's attention? Mm-hmm. We couldn't get that before on the right because they're not really hearing you. They're hearing the conspiratorial stuff. Okay, fine. So then I see RFK appear as a guest on Math Hoffa's podcast called My Expert Opinion, which is a very widely watched podcast, and they normally interview rap personalities from the past, and great conversations. Shouts to my boy Mecca. He's one of the co-hosts on the show. I know him. I don't know Math, but it's a good show. But RFK's on there, and I'm like, that's weird because
that was the one thing that was pretty widely publicized.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't think Math Hoffa and them. I don't know. My guess is that they didn't reach out to RFK. My guess is that RFK reached out to them. Mm-hmm. And they, not being a politically oriented show, and I'm not saying their political IQ isn't up to where it needs to be, but if Robert Kennedy...
That's not their lane, yeah.
Right, it's not their lane.
Yeah.
But if Robert Kennedy says, hey, I'd like to be on your show... And they're like, yeah, hell yeah, Robert Kennedy, bro, come through. That's
what I'm saying.
And the first 20 minutes was him growing up, in the White House or wherever he was when he was a kid, and this legacy, the Camelot extended. So now you get this like favorable opinion to this guy who then goes off and doesn't matter what he says because you're only gonna take sound clips anyway. No one's watching the whole interview anyway. But you got Robert Kennedy now on a hip hop podcast, and so anyone who's vaguely aware of that thinks that he's aligned.
So in a different way, because you and I were talking about this during the Bernie campaign about how Killer Mike had attached himself and it didn't matter. It didn't resonate. Bernie really never pulled from the black community in the way that
nobody does.
That you would hope a populist progressive message would pull from the black community, right? But here now we have not one, two. We've got RFK Jr. And you've got Cornel West, who is as divisive in the black community as pretty much just anybody else.
Well, everybody is. We could talk about Will and Jada, and you'll have people on either side of that argument all day right now in the black community. There's no consensus. That's why there's no monolith. Trust me.
Right.
I know my friends. You know what I mean? Yeah. And
but when it comes to Dr. West, there are. He went after Obama so hard that you see, like he even had that huge split with Ta-Nehisi Coates, which was so devastating for people in the progressive movement because you're like, these are the two voices that we now want to amplify going forward. This is great. This is black scholarship. This is at the highest level. And then there was a fracture there. But there's 1,000 other fractures that are, again, to us, we can't see them. We can't hear them. They're unseen. But I have this sense now that it's not being built into the Democratic calculus of what's about to happen over the next year, and that the black vote may actually be more fractured than at any other time, save for Jesse Jackson being in the mix. Right? Had Jesse Jackson run as an independent, holy shit. What percentage of the vote would that guy have gotten? Oh my goodness, right?
Because the numbers of the primary, right?
Oh yeah. It was
formidable.
That was a horse race. I think it was the electoral count in the primary was like 1,400 to 1,000.
Right.
And they had to pull out all of the fucking stops. To get him off the ballot. And they didn't go after him for vice president after that. They just snubbed him entirely just to kind of quash the entire movement.
Yeah.
Black people have a long memory.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
They know what the fuck happened there.
Yes.
In a way that we don't. Again, I keep saying the we, the royal we,
right,
representing the white part of society in America. I just don't think that the pollsters are going to tap into it. I don't think that people understand the level.
Yeah.
That, again, so when I hear hip hop can save America, in a lot of ways, I really agree this year because
right.
How else?
It can also damage America.
Well, it could if it propagates some of the theories that we know to be harmful to the institution.
That's what's happening.
But then again, the fuck are we to say?
Right.
Because
lived
experience and lived reality is more real.
That's right.
Your personal reality, whatever your experience was that informs your worldview, is reality.
Right.
And we all have our own one. So that's why I say hip-hop really could save America this go-around if not those big names that we 100%. All know about on the ground.
100%.
If there was a different chatter.
100%.
And they started to, to coalesce around but what are they going to do? Start rapping about Biden? Start having lectures and conferences about Biden? I mean, we're missing the boat.
Well, the furtherance of the work, my work, is that. So, yes, I was stumbling to find who's doing what now because it's all small, it's all grassroots, it's some organizations. It's the Hip Hop Caucus, which is big. I don't necessarily endorse them. They're a big organization. They do some work, but I don't know. I haven't investigated. Big hip hop nonprofits is a Hip Hop Public Health is a great nonprofit. I've interviewed them. They put on great galas. They raise a lot of money. They bring public health awareness to the communities through hip hop. I don't endorse them. I don't know how much money they're spending. I don't know the real effectiveness of their work. I have to investigate that. So when I say like the small, generally those are the ones I trust. Rebel Diaz had a thing in the Bronx called the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective when they were in the Bronx, and it was a small community organization. They brought in kids and they taught them how to do music, but they also taught them, Rebel Diaz, they're going to teach you that revolutionary politics.
Oh, yeah.
They're teaching you that. So what Rebel Diaz did in the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective for however many years they did it in the Bronx was more effective to raise civic awareness and raise the next generation of at least progressive, if not revolutionary, thinkers in the world. Their effectiveness is the rate of effectiveness is better than any of the big names, anything that they could do. I think they probably had more people registered to vote than Diddy's entire Vote or Die campaign, which was all over the media for years. So I know we're getting long in time. Nobody's doing it in the political spectrum. They're not. I don't want to say using. It's a terrible word because again, you can't use hip hop in a way for positivity unless you're authentically connected to it, right? So you'll see a politician grab a Killer Mike. Keisha Lance Bottoms did this in Atlanta. T.I. and Killer Mike, fine. That's cute, No one's going to change. No one's going to become politically involved because you brought Killer Mike on stage. Because if you're there at the rally, you're already politically involved. You're not bringing anyone in. So they're not doing it. It is the grassroots, on the ground organizations.
Right.
But there's no coalition. There's no database. There's no talking to each other. I'm finding them out like I'm throughout the country. I'm learning of them, and I know and I'm interviewing them, trying to amplify them. But are we putting them into a coalition? No. I have a campaign in mind that I'm talking ahead of time to literally ask every politician of note in the country, what's your hip hop policy? Like, how are you working hip hop into your campaign, into your messaging? Because no one is.
Right.
And if they do it right, here's the other thing I was gonna say: no one cares. Like young folks, don't care about Cornel West.
Right.
They don't care about RFK, but they saw RFK on Math Hoffa. Immediately he's winning the hip hop crowd over Cornel West because Cornel West isn't on Math Hoffa. So if you ask, my son is, my oldest son is a good, bellwether for this because I'm sure he knows who RFK is because he saw him on Math Hoffa. He's the target audience. He's 30 something. He's, right in that kind of lane, but he probably doesn't even know who Cornel West is or doesn't. I know him, but
yeah, I heard of that guy.
I heard of that guy.
Yeah.
But RFK, man, Kennedy, Math Hoffa. Well, my fear is that the right's figuring this out. That was my thesis of the far right infiltration of hip hop piece that I wrote, and I'm doing some more. So now Ice Cube is on Tucker Carlson. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why would Tucker Carlson go for Ice Cube? Because one puppet master somewhere.
Oh, but that wasn't the question, Manny.
Okay.
The question, no, I'm saying why would Tucker go for
Right.
The question wasn't, that. It was
Right.
well, why would Ice Cube go to Tucker? And it's like, again,
Right.
You're not listening. You're not paying
Right.
attention. If
Right.
you don't know the answer to that question, you're not paying attention.
Absolutely. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. You could be a black rap artist in America and be on the right. Of course you can. You could believe and honestly believe that that's the better path for you. I don't know if Candace Owens is performing or not, but there are a lot of people who agree with all of these things. The issue is
well, I think there's a very big difference between the black conservative who is still considered. I believe so. Like I watch FD Signifier. I think it's one of the better one of the better channels. Talking about the black conservative movement is entirely different than talking about a libertarian oriented black vote. Right. And if the Democrats don't understand their constituency that they have absolutely taken for granted since forever. Yeah. If they don't understand where that constituency is landing right now in the moment, they're going to miss certain obvious cues. They did it, and that's where I go back to that's where I go back to Bannon. That's where I go back to. There are people on the right who know the algorithms, who are figuring this shit out, and who understand, I think, in a much deeper way, how to tap into sentiment and extract what's valuable from there to get an RFK on the right podcast, right? Whereas the Democrats are going to keep running the same playbook and the same playbook. What was really,
they'll put them on the Breakfast Club, which did nothing for them.
Exactly. So what was extraordinary and new during the Obama years, because that's who's still running everything, is the Obama campaign playbook. That's still what's running everything. Right. It worked for Obama because Obama was a black man. Right. And also got the youth involved to run the campaign. That's right. And that youth that ran the campaign, they're in their 40s now. Right. They're in their late 30s and 40s. They're not the young people anymore. Right. They don't know how to tap into sentiment. They do not know how to They're still running the same fundraising emails. Right. They're still running the same ads on the same algorithms, and they're still fighting the. That's right. If we don't recognize that the reason Donald Trump got elected in the first fucking place but lost the majority is because the majority of people fell into algorithmically the shit that he was pushing. Right. And it's those guys that made the difference. It's the Bannons of the world. Bannon is so far ahead with understanding where the black culture movement is today. That's funny. Yeah. And that's so I guess that's my biggest fear. All right, so we got to wrap.
I was gonna say one thing. I was gonna say, there were so many people that didn't like Hillary Clinton because of Haiti.
And ask anybody on the Democratic side if
they thought about that,
and they'd be like, What does that even mean? Right. I thought it was the hot sauce in the purse. That was so offensive. That's what I'm saying. Right.
But I know people. There's a huge community that were like, I just can't for her because of how she. You don't. No. They don't think about this. No, they don't think about it. So yes, you're right. They don't know their constituency. They're losing probably every time.
Also, her emails.
Butter emails. Butter emails. Anyway, so yes.
Listen, we got to wrap.
I know, so long. It's like a show notes.
Because we got meetings here, but also you got to get into the city to get your award, which is so well deserved. And so what I want to close on is just to, again, say thank you for being such an extraordinary producer. But I'm so happy that we could have these moments together as well so that we can introduce some of the other lanes. I'm always amazed at the intersections that we're able to find in the work that's being done, and I would encourage every unfucker to obviously download HipHop Can Save America to your podcast app. Let's get those subs up as well because tide lifts all boats, as I'm fond of saying. But I do think that we need to start cross-pollinating the feeds in this way, and cross-pollinating our understandings. I would like to link to your far right infiltration article. We'll obviously put up all the things. Is there anything else that we should link to? Maybe actually, if you can give us a couple of the people that are doing some great work out there that you follow and you admire, we can include them in the links for the show as well.
Yep.
And just want to say, I love you. The Unfuckers love you. You get a lot of love on this show, as you deserve. And thanks for coming in, brother.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I appreciate the Unfuckers. Thank you so much. I appreciate the love, and I do appreciate the work that we do here. And it's funny. I look at everything through this, hip hop lens. So I'll be my plumbers at the house. And I'm like, how could plumbing? How could you big up plumbing in a way that how can we put a hip hop style into plumbing, everything, but politically, economically, sociologically, the stuff that we cover here, I do find a lot of inspiration and knowledge from, and ways to connect these dots that I think can help both movements. And I think that tide, can actually help lift boats. So I appreciate it.
All right, Unfuckers, we will catch you. The next thing you'll see from us is probably the part 1, really part 2, but it's the part 1 of the Israel-Palestine series that we're doing, and a bunch of new stuff after that. So don't forget to like and subscribe to what's happening on YouTube for us. Don't forget to give us a review. If you haven't left a review yet for the show, that really helps it get found in the algorithm. And while you're at it, download HipHop Can Save America. Leave it a review. Make sure it's 5 stars, okay? And we'll catch you when we catch you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Manny, thanks again.
Peace and love.
See you later.
I am William Wallace.